So welcome to the final session of How to Be a Unitarian. Thank you for staying the distance. I think you know who I am now. My name's Jane Blackwell, Ministry Coordinator with Kensington Unitarians, and pleased to see we've got a real mix of congregations in again this evening. I will put the course outline up on screen one last time so you can see where we've been and where we're going. Oops, my computer's been a bit slow tonight. There we go. So tonight's theme is being a Unitarian in the world and living your faith every day. We'll do as we usually do. We'll look back a bit to last week's theme and then look forward to tonight's. A reminder of the format of the group. We do it in a kind of engagement group style. The point is to look after relationships and treat each other well. So let's pay attention to our speaking and our listening. It's not a debate in society. Be kind and be real. Speak for yourself as much as you can rather than making assumptions or generalizations. And if you're someone who tends to speak a lot, try not to dominate the conversation. If you're someone who tends to keep quiet, maybe challenge yourself to speak up for a change. But everything is optional. There's a pass option for everything. Contribute at the level that you feel is right for you. As I always say, if you have questions, especially factual questions, I prefer it if you put them in the chat so that I've got a bit of thinking time before I answer. And you can always email me afterwards if there's anything you want me to respond to after the course finishes. And I am recording the sessions. So if you've missed any of the others, let me know. If I didn't send you the link, they will, as we discussed before we started, they will stay online in perpetuity, even though they're not public. They will be there for your reference. I think that's everything. So let's have a candle light and a chalice lighting and an opening words to settle in, to set the tone for what's to come. Lizzie, have you got the words to hand? Lovely. I'll light the chalice and you can do our opening words.
Okay. Hi everyone. Come, let us enter this space of hope and community. Come, let us enter this space with our sorrows, our joys, our passion and compassion. Come, let us enter this space with the stories of our ancestors, for their strength and wisdom beats in our hearts. Come into this space, present to the beloved companions who move beside us. Come into this space, mindful that together we are building a future for other generations. Come into this space and let us explore together.
Thanks, Lizzie. So before we go any further, let us have a check-in as we always do. Let me put the prompts up on the screen. I'm going to put you into groups of 3 or 4. And the invitation is to say your name, where you're from, how you're doing this evening, and something you do or have done, no matter how small it might seem, that makes the world a better place, a more just place, more fair place, more peaceful place. Big yourselves up, something you do that makes the world better. As I say, you'll be in groups of 3 or 4, and you'll have 10 minutes, so 2.5 minutes each or a bit longer. Try and share the time out fairly if you can, and don't comment on what other people share or interrupt it. I just need to, you can think about that for a second while I finalise the breakout rooms. Okay. So I'm going to send you to your rooms and you've got 10 minutes. So before we get on to tonight's topic, we always do, which is look back to the homework from last time. I asked you each to tell us one way in which you're going to work on your personal spiritual literacy or spiritual practices this spring, maybe by reading something or talking to someone or taking up a practice or resuming a practice you'd lapsed. I have anonymized the responses and I'll be circulating them afterwards. If you sent one in today, it'll be on the handout, but I didn't get around to put it on the slides. Lizzie and Michael are going to help me read these out and I will put them up on screen.
I will try to find Catherine Robinson's book of daily reflections and spend real time on the one for today.
I've ordered Fragments of Holiness. Someone else on the course recommended it with the aim of reading a little bit each day. My first ever Unitarian book.
I am going to continue to use the Daily Stoic, which is a collection of meditations from Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and did I say that right? And explore how the concept of rational virtue can enrich my spiritual journey.
I will be following my usual spiritual practice of reading an excerpt from a religious text each day during Lent. At present, I'm reading an English translation of the Quran.
I find it difficult to separate my spiritual development from my intellectual development, my endless curiosity to understand the world we live in, and my life in the community. However, I've decided to read again a book which I read some time ago. It's by the Palestinian Lutheran pastor Mitri Raheb. The book is entitled Faith in the Face of Empire, the Bible through Palestinian Eyes. This book had an impact when I first read it. It is theology steeped in politics. I'm hoping to get even more from it this time.
I've read widely on religious and spiritual matters. One book I want to read is Marcion's Bible. He's an interesting ancient thinker who argued that the harsh God of the Old Testament is not the same God as the loving God of the New Testament. As a result, Marcon's Bible is much shorter than the traditional Christian one. I also own a book on Mancunianism, which I haven't read yet, so I would like to start reading it. My spiritual education revolves around reading texts from many traditions, some of them unusual or unorthodox, with each possibly having a grain or grains of truth.
My commitment is to seek out, be allocated a member of the congregation who will mentor my reading and spiritual growth within the Unitarian Church.
I would like to be more connected with the seasons and mid-season celebrations.
I try to regularly meditate, and I already tend to read on spiritual and religious topics, but I'm much less well practiced at embodied spirituality, and I also sometimes struggle to consciously integrate my beliefs into the rhythm of a busy day. So this year, my aim is to do some body work and movement with a very lovely and wise yoga teacher in my congregation. Meanwhile, our aim as a family is to say a kind of Unitarian flavoured grace at the start of our evening meal, where we take a moment to acknowledge what we have been grateful for during the day. This is less solemn than it sounds, as we have young children, so it usually includes references to dinosaurs, unicorns, and cake.
I would like to attend our General Assembly this spring. This, for me, addresses spiritual literacy. As for my own spiritual development, I'm hoping to expand on my walks in the woods and my yoga practice Ideally, I would also revisit Tai Chi, which has been a spiritual practice of mine in the past. But there's always life. Well, we'll see how it unfolds.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Lizzie. So we've got until past, got about 8 minutes to add anything we want to add about us and spiritual practices. Last time, I think the title was something like, taking responsibility for our own spiritual life, doing our own spiritual work. So maybe something that was on those slides prompted something in you. Maybe you didn't get to send in a response and you'd like to tell us now what you're going to do. Yeah, use this time how you like. We've got 7 minutes now because I've been waffling. Go for it, Emily, and then Ava.
Yeah, so I do apologise, Jane, because I didn't send my homework in. That's naughty of me, given that I'm usually a good girl. So that was a little bit rebellious, wasn't it? Yeah, so one thing that struck me out of there that I had been thinking about was a mentor, or sort of, buddying up with somebody. Because I'm just not particularly disciplined when it comes to spiritual practice. I think I make things very difficult for myself and think I've got to sit there for 20 minutes in the morning meditating, and it never happens. So I was thinking to get more into Unitarianism, it might pay off if I got a buddy, and yes, maybe started working through some Unitarian books or something to help sort of ground me a little bit more in my knowledge. So, and is that something? Not just a question for you, Jane, but for other everybody here. I mean, is that something that happens within the organisation?
I would say on an ad hoc and occasional basis, but it's always, I would always encourage people to start those things from the ground up, especially if you've got a captive audience of Unitarians here to try and recruit.
I just wonder, Emily, if it would be quite easy for me to administrate a very, very straightforward spreadsheet of people who are looking for buddies to do spiritual work with, rather than a director or a mentor, someone more like a kind of peer to beer. I mean, that would be good too. Peer to peer mentoring. I wonder if that might be quite easy for me to set up, actually. It'd be interesting. Also, I'll be your buddy, Emily. We could read poems together.
Excellent.
Oh, that sounds lovely. Lizzie, thank you. Yeah. No, I think as well something about peer to peer is that's quite a good thing as well. So there's not sort of not a power imbalance, because we are effectively all equal. But I do like the sound of that. So I'd be really up for that. And if you wanted a hand with that, Lizzie, in any way, that I could sort of encourage or help it, or maybe we get a Facebook group up and running, or I don't know, but yeah, there you go.
Excellent.
Be cool, wouldn't it? Yeah, if anyone else here wants to join in, if you drop me an email, I'll see what I can do, and maybe Emily and I can almost like document various people and what they might like to do. That would be kind of cool.
Perhaps at the end of the evening, we'll have a think about how we can, keep in touch with each other if we want to make those connections afterwards. The other thing to mention is, of course, things like this do occur in a kind of slightly random way. I've heard from a lot of people after this call started saying, "Oh, I wish I'd signed up," but you're already 3 sessions in. So anyone who's in a position to run stuff of their own, it just makes opportunities at different days and times of the week for different combinations of people to get together, and we can all be a part of that. Hey, Ava, did you have your hand up?
No, so basically what encouraged me looking at other people's pledges was that there were a few who mentioned as more kind of like physical aspect, like doing yoga or walks, and that kind of really spoke to me, because normally I'm a person who likes reading and finding things out, but I feel that I'm not up for it this spring at all. Somehow it feels like more natural for me to commit to something like, for example, gardening, but I didn't even know that that's like a thing. But I feel like now I can pledge that's what I'll be trying to do, and that will be my spiritual practice and kind of meditation, actually doing something practical.
Excellent, thank you. Julia.
Yeah, I'm just following up on what Emily and Lizzie were talking about. I sent in my homework, but it was very late. I have a buddy or a mentor or what I call a teacher, and I like the fact that I consider her a teacher because she's more studied than I am. She has been a Buddhist for 20 years, and that's what we're focusing on. But she's also been a Unitarian for 50 years, so she has a lot of wisdom. And what we decided to do is we have a once weekly book talk. And in fact, we're just going to start this book on Thich Nhat Hanh's called Fear, but we've done a book on Pema Chodron as well. And although it's not Unitarianism, it certainly is developing my spiritual aspect, the aspect of my life. And I just love the fact that sometimes we talked about motivation and discipline, but if somebody is there with you and you're together sharing your personal experiences about religion and spirituality, and with someone who perhaps has studied more than you have studied or delved into it, I think it's really quite rewarding. For me, it is anyway. Thank you.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous that you sent that one in today, and that will be, your bit will be included in the bit I send around afterwards. Thanks, Julia. We've got time for one more. Jennifer.
Hi, Jane.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I've been traveling, so I'm still sort of trying to untravel myself. So, and I didn't do any homework. But listening to everybody, I just want to advocate being. That's what enough. Not unlike one of these dogs that's not being. Come here. Is a good spiritual practice is about being with whatever God of your understanding that happens to be, or that you're finding that out, or you don't know. But it's about being in nature, just sitting, just breathing, just being in that comfortable or uncomfortable space of not doing and not trying to improve oneself and know more or learn more, but to actually, breathe in and out in the here and now. And I certainly, that's my commitment to myself, to do more breathing in and out in the here and now, and just being in the presence of God rather than trying to have a multitude of self-improvement.
Yeah, this is definitely not a case for striving. It's life continues to happen and be complicated, so please don't feel chastised about homework or anything else. I think we'll move on unless anyone's itching to speak. All right, so I sent out a little handout today that I'll be referring to, but most of it actually I'm going to put on screen. So there's two strands that I want to pick up in this being a Unitarian in the world. One is about faith in action, social justice, that sort of thing. And the other is about Unitarian identity and evangelism. I'm dropping that word in now, and then I'll unpack it in a moment. So let me put some quotes. I've picked some quotes from a variety of sources. I had a question before the session tonight, which I will address actually out loud, because It may be in several of your minds. Someone asked, why are there so many UU sources, American sources, not so many British ones? My answer was, there's a lot more UU material out there, and it's a lot easier to find contemporary material. That's about the size of it. It's not a favouring of one over the other. It's just, what could I lay my hands on that spoke to the issues that I wanted to talk about? Perhaps that should be a challenge to all of us in the UK to get out there and write more. Anyway, I'm going to put a bunch of quotes on the screen. So the first one, this was on a previous generation. No, not that one. Let me put this quote up. This was on a previous iteration of the General Assembly website. The pursuit of social justice has always been core to the Unitarian way. The vision of the kingdom of God, a global commonwealth of peace, justice, and plenty for all, has always been important for Unitarians. It's inspired social and political involvement across a range of concerns. From the UUA, social justice work has long been a part of Unitarian Universalism, and for almost as long it's been a source of tension within and among congregations. One dearly held value, the right to freedom of belief, at times conflicts with our belief that collective social justice work is crucial to who we are as religious people. In the words of James Luther Adams, right attitudes are never sufficient alone. They must find embodiment in social institutions. Indeed, one must say that one does not even understand the meaning of right attitudes, or even of a theology, until one recognizes their implications for social organization. The rightness of our theological beliefs cannot be understood without our involvement in trying to make the world reflect the values we hold. For that reason, social justice, and in particular collective social justice, are required for a full understanding of Unitarian Universalism. And finally, our Unitarian Universalist tradition teaches that it's more important what you do, whether you live a life of kindness and compassion, peace and justice, than what you say or you believe. As the motto goes, we believe in deeds, not creeds. Or as John Adams, the second president of the US and Unitarians, said, I do not attach much importance to creed because I believe one cannot be wrong whose life is right. To adapt an old evangelist line about behaviours and beliefs, if you were accused in court of being a Unitarian Universalist, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Now that line is potentially more guilt-inducing than is helpful, but the point is our tradition challenges us. It's not what we say we believe and value that matters, it's what we actually do. Deeds, not creeds. Behaviour is believable. So I suppose all I want to say to speak to that is to say, perhaps we can reflect, how does your faith, however you see it, how does that play out in your everyday life? In how you relate to other people around you, your work, your activism, your politics, and how do we collectively put our faith into action as congregations or societies? How do we use the resources of our congregations to serve the greater good? And then to move on to the second strand on identity and evangelism. Richard Davis wrote, I think that street corner evangelists who shout and accost people are not only displaying poor marketing skills, but disrespect for people's right to freely choose whether to listen or not. On the other hand, I must confess that we Unitarian Universalists, overly conscientious about not forcing our religious views on others, go too far in the other direction and hide our light under a bushel, which is to say that most people don't even know we exist. On a number of occasions, I've had to personally face the frustration and anger of newcomers who've said, I've been looking for something like Unitarian Universalism for years. Why the heck didn't you make your presence known? To which I respond defensively, well, it's not my fault. Well, okay, it's partly my fault for not advocating for more outreach. I guess we don't do a very good job of this. And someone that goes by I am UU wrote, the word evangelism has developed a bad connotation for a lot of people who think of evangelize as synonymous with proselytize. The words are related, but proselytization is about trying to convince someone and convert them to your way of thinking. Evangelism is just sharing something with someone because you think it might be good for them. It's about engaging people, not ensnaring them. Share your ideas. Let people know that you're part of a community that affirms and promotes a set of principles that help guide you. If they aren't interested, let the conversation move on. That shows respect for their personal dignity and their search for truth and meaning in their life, both by offering to explore ideas with them and by allowing them to say no. The invitation, the offer to share and to listen, shows your respect for them by suggesting that your community has room for them and that their voice is welcome. So on that strand, I suppose I just want to say, it's something that's come up in previous sessions actually. So many of us are a little bit ambivalent about claiming our Unitarian identity at all, especially claiming it in public. You know, perhaps it's about a lack of clarity about what it means to be a Unitarian. If so, hopefully you're a bit clearer about that than you were in January. Perhaps it's about social stigma around being religious, being seen to be religious, and we'll come back to that in the reading from Paul Razor, which we're going to discuss later on. I would like to encourage us to overcome our reluctance to speak about Unitarianism outside of Unitarian congregations. Perhaps I don't need to say any more about that because a lot of it was covered in the quotes. Hopefully you'll have that little handout to hand if you want to refer to any of it. But we've got, again, 7 or 8 minutes now. Anything that came off the back of that, anything that came up for you about your living your Unitarianism in the world, or about having Unitarian identity or spreading the word?
I have a few challenges with that. The first one is Unitarianism doesn't exist in France. So I would have to explain it every time. And as we've covered already, it's quite difficult to explain. So I usually don't mention it. There's also another problem, which is that I'm a teacher, and as a teacher, I have to keep my faith completely private and cannot ever mention it. And so, I mean, in school, obviously. But it does mean that I have to be very careful about some of the things I say, whereas when I was in London, I used to work in a Church of England school, and it was okay if I said, well, on Sunday I went to church, and no one was going to judge me for that. But here, as a teacher, and in France in general, it has connotations that I don't feel comfortable sharing. And my last issue is in my day-to-day life, and when I'm annoyed with some people doing some things, I find it difficult to apply the values I know I have to normal situations.
I mean, that second one's the work of a lifetime, isn't it? So I feel pretty relaxed about that. Living up to our values is not something that's a done job. And yeah, definitely the first half of what you said, that's very specific to your situation. Although what occurs to me is you're one of the few people I know who does wear a chalice, which is always a good way to start conversations if you're looking to. Louise.
Oh, it's interesting you've just said that, Jane. I actually do have quite a few chalice pins, which I've decorated various coats and jackets with. I tend not to wear them. I do have chalice jewelry to wear it for Sundays. Yes, it is interesting. I suppose it's a tricky thing with Unitarians because we love to argue about words, and maybe we shouldn't get so hung up on it. I must admit, I tend to prefer neither proselytizing or evangelizing, but simply outreach, in the sense that there are people out there who I hope might want to be part of our community, and I want to reach out to them and let them know we exist. Hopefully we can all start to do that a bit more. But it is difficult, obviously not for the same factors that we've just heard, but I can vouch for the fact that mentioning your religious can really, not to overshare, put a real crimp in your love life, because people hear church and make a set of assumptions, and it's difficult. I don't wish to hide a fundamental part of my identity, but at the same time, having to continually preface every relationship with either hiding that or going on about, and this is what I actually believe, please don't make assumptions about that I hold the same beliefs as the most fundamental churches you've heard of. I really don't. It's actually quite the challenge.
Yeah, I think I would endorse that. It is quite wearisome having those assumptions made about you. And as much as there's a bit of me that wants to say, and so we should be representing a different kind of religion and changing people's minds. It's really tiring and annoying. And yeah, I'd quite understand why people have had enough of doing that. There was something else you mentioned. What was it? Oh, about the language of evangelism versus outreach. Yeah, I mean, whatever language works for you. I've come to really like the language of evangelism because of the good news thing. I think, when I get as far as that in a conversation with someone, I might well say this has completely transformed my life. I hope it does the same for you. Rosemary, don't forget to unmute yourself.
Yeah, and that I think is right. You actually talk about your own faith and where you got to talk about Unitarianism, I think, is one of the things we've been trying to do for too long, that it actually, because everybody is different and we're all very proud of the fact that we're all different, unless you start off with what you've had and say to somebody else, the person who sits next to me thinks differently, which opens up the fact that if they think differently, it still doesn't matter, that it's still important, that it can be of value to them. So, and I've been trying to make that sort of message for some time, but I don't have enough people to talk to on that sort of level. But I'm sure that's one of the ways one can go. How you found your own faith and why it's different from my next door neighbour.
And as you said in the very first line, your experience, that sense of, if someone says, well, what did you do on Friday night? Well, I went to Heart and Soul. What's that? Or whatever, and this is what it is, and that's why it's important to me. It's a much more real conversation for most people. Life is hard, and this helps me live. It is a much more meaningful conversation to most people than a kind of rarefied theology. Go for it, Anas.
Yeah. So I had some reticence, obviously, with sharing any sort of religious thing, sort of just because there's connotations associated with it in various communities. But for example, not putting this on blast, because one of my closest friends is from Latter-day Saints. She's Mormon, closest friends. But it's always really intense whenever I kind of go around communities that are Mormon, because they try to convert you, and it's really intense a little bit. It's quite off-putting for me as an experience. So I don't want to. Yeah, I don't know if there's a fine line between balancing it, but from the communities that I've experienced, where it's very much so, yeah, just trying to convert you into it. It's difficult, and because I've had some negative experiences, again, not from my friend and not from everyone, but has really put me off to trying to be open about any sort of religious thing, and then just backlash. So it makes me fearful of talking about any sort of religious or spiritual.
No, I hear that, and a lot of people have been burned. I suppose I would all just come back to what was in that final quote that I read out, people saying, oh, I wish I'd found this sooner, why didn't I hear about it? So I would hold that intention with, of course we don't want to be a pest to anybody, but we have got something that people might be glad to know about. Yeah, Eva.
In that case, the question is, how do you go about it? How do you find that balance? It's a rhetorical question, but because I really resonate with what you said, and also couple of other people here. I also, because I feel that it's, if someone was coming up to me and started talking about why they believe in certain things and I should be believing in the same thing, that's really off-putting, and that's why I like this community, because it doesn't do that, and it's so kind of like it's my pace that I'm taking it in, I suppose, and no one's like checking in on me and saying, why were you not here, or like something like this. So I want to offer that to other people as well, Dan, freedom of choice. But on the other hand, as you were reading in that text, if people ask, why didn't I know about this sooner? And that's how I also felt not that long ago myself. So where is that balance?
Yeah, and perhaps that's probably a good point for us to pause. It's probably a question we'll all take away, but it will look different in each of our lives. Go on, Natalie, I'll let you have a go and then we'll move on. I'm trying to move us along a little bit quicker tonight, so we've got longer to finish up.
Okay, I don't mind leaving it. I wasn't going to say anything, and this is not something I do actually usually share with people, because it's not a part of my life that I like talking about, but I felt that maybe I should come in and respond to what was said by, I think it was
Elnaz.
Yeah, so I kind of can speak from both sides of the fence really on this, because I was brought up as a Latter-day Saint, as a Mormon, and I was forced to proselytize as part of that religion, and I totally agree. I totally disagree with how they do it. So I'm agreeing with what the previous speaker said on that. It borders on harassment, and the intention is very much to convert. I hated doing it. I'm sure the people that we spoke to hated us doing it in the main as well. And for that reason, I really struggle with this question, because I'm so against people trying to convert others, trying to force their views on others. However, when I left the Mormon church, I did go through a really difficult period of nearly 2 decades where I was looking for something, but I didn't think that what I was looking for existed. And so I was then one of those people that when I found Unitarianism, thought, why didn't I know about this before? This is exactly what I wanted. So for me, the answer I've come up with, which makes sense to me based on my 2 experiences of having to proselytize and hating that experience and thinking it's wrong, but then not knowing about Unitarianism sooner like I wished I had, is we believe everybody should have a choice, but they do have to know we exist to have a choice. Like, they can't choose to be involved in Unitarianism if they don't know about it. So for me, it's much more about publicizing, whether that's done in a marketing way or just in general conversation. But the intention is never to force anything on people, to convert them. But I do think we have a lot of people that don't know we exist, and it can't be a choice for them if they don't know about us. So I hope that makes sense, but I just felt like I had some personal experience relevant to some comments that had been made.
No, that was really spot on. Thanks, Natalie. That's really helpful. And I hope in the quotes I chose that came across that element of no coercion, but laying it out there with an open hand. I will move on at this point. I'm going to give you 9 or 10 minutes in small groups, and just for a free conversation about how your Unitarian values inform your attitude towards social justice or activism work or ways of being in the world. How do your Unitarian values play out in the way that you are in the world, the way you make the world a better place, to go back to the check-in. So let me just check the breakout rooms while you have a little think about that. Okay, I'm going to give you 8 minutes and you'll get a 1 minute warning after that to discuss that. So yeah, how do your Unitarian values play out in your way of being in the world? And actually I better just reshuffle a breakout room because someone's left. Okay, see you in a bit. So I picked out a piece by Paul Razor for you to read since the last session. As always, it doesn't matter too much if you haven't read it. I'm going to pull out an excerpt for us to look at together. I'll get that up on screen. So this is about identity, covenant, and commitment. We cannot create a prophetic church unless we know who we are. We must intentionally reclaim our religious identity. We need to know why and be able to say why this is religious work. Yet a significant number of Unitarians resist identifying as religious beings, especially in public. This resistance cuts us off from our heritage and weakens our prophetic practice. To succeed in the long run, we will need constructive Unitarian theologies. Reclaiming our religious identity requires recovering and naming the core theological principles that ground us as a movement. As Meg Riley put it, we need to articulate a visionary theology of who we are and who we are in the world. Unitarianism, like other forms of religious liberalism, contains several theological tensions that can interfere with our prophetic practice by causing us to stumble over our own best intentions. Paradoxically, many tensions are byproducts of our greatest strengths. Unitarianism is characterized by a theological openness that emphasizes free religious inquiry and autonomous judgment in matters of faith. This commitment is grounded in the liberal understanding that religious authority is located in individual reason and experience, rather than in any external source such as the Church or the Bible. For Unitarians, no claim of truth can be accepted simply because it is steeped in tradition or because the Church or some other established authority declares it. As a result, Unitarians tend to have an open-ended approach to our faith commitments. We're quite comfortable, for example, with the notions that religious doctrines change over time, that religious meaning is constructed rather than given, and that truth or revelation is continuously unfolding. By the same token, our faith is not likely to be threatened by new scientific discoveries or advances in biblical scholarship. This principled theological openness is one of liberalism's greatest strengths. With its roots in our commitment to intellectual honesty, theological openness helps our faith stay credible and relevant to the needs of our time. This open-endedness also contributes to a tendency to hold religious commitments lightly, which can make us unsure of our religious identity. We might call this the liberal fear of being pinned down. In On Being Human Religiously, James Luther Adam quipped that openness without more articulation can produce the mind that is simply open at both ends. His point is that religious liberals are often reluctant to embrace the firm religious commitments that sustain a strong prophetic practice. Many Unitarians are reluctant to speak religiously in public context, especially outside denominational gatherings, because we do not want to appear too religious. Over the past quarter century, the most visible and vocal religious groups in America have been aligned with the religious right. Unitarians resist religious language to avoid the conservative associations with being publicly religious today. By the same token, liberal commitment to tolerance and free religious inquiry encourages us to avoid even the appearance of proselytizing, which we tend to associate with conservative evangelism. While understandable, this is unfortunate. It cedes the public religious space to the loudest and most conservative speakers and effectively silences the liberal prophetic voice. So some challenging stuff from Paul Razor. So the question I want you to ponder for 10 minutes on your own, first of all, is, have you experienced this reluctance or reticence to claim a Unitarian identity or any religious identity that Razor describes, or have you witnessed it in Unitarian communities? Do you have, or could you imagine developing firm religious commitments that sustain a strong prophetic practice? By prophetic practice, I mean committed to social justice or peace or anti-oppression work, some sort of public witness, living out your Unitarian values in action every day. There's a lot there, so just go with the bit that grabs you, and you've got 10 minutes by yourself, so till 20 past, pondering those questions in silence, and after that I'll put you into groups to share what has come up for you. Okay, so that brings us up to 10 minutes. So I'm going to put you in very slightly shuffled groups of 4, I think, to just share whatever came up from that. Try and share the time equally if you can. And I will find you some biographical information. I'll Paul Razor in the meantime. See you in 10 minutes. We have got 9 minutes for anything you want to share that came up from those conversations. I'm leaving a good chunk of time at the end of the session so that we can end properly and not in a rush. So yeah, the floor is open. Ben, please.
I think leading on from the discussion we just had in answering the dilemma of owning universal Unitarian stuff, codes of conduct, belief systems, practices. And it sits comfortably when I can use the language that sits comfortably with me. So personally, for me, I feel quite comfortable to say I'm going to church on Zoom, or I'm going to the meeting house on Sunday in person. And maybe it's because I can say that the meeting house is not a temple or a Buddhist gathering or a Labour Party convention or something, because people know that's where I'm coming from. And if I have declared I'm going to church, then they know, or I'm implying that I'm going to a spiritual practice place of which. So as long as I am comfortable in the language I use, then I don't need to be reticent about using that language. And I think it's important that we all find the language that we are comfortable with, because language is consciousness. And I can't declare to be a Methodist or something to my uncle, who may be a Methodist or something, because I don't know what that is to start with. I don't have a working definition of that. But if I have a working definition that I'm comfortable with, then I can use that language easily.
Yeah, there's a lot in there. And I suppose it's something we come back to a lot, is religious language and its connotations, which are different for everybody and which everybody's worked through to different degrees. So there's a lot in there. Louise.
That's a bit of a side note, but one thing I found interesting is that my workplace has become more diverse over the years, and as such it's actually become easier to claim a religious identity at work, because when you have Sajda as a Muslim and Imran as Sikh or Hindu, it's easier to, when you have a range of people claiming religious identities rather than being the only religious one.
Yeah, thanks, Louise. Rosemary, don't forget to unmute.
From that, in a way, one of the statement that Carolyn said was that God has no religion, and you know, in your situation, Louise, I should think that must be quite helpful, because you're all sort of different, and therefore if your God has no religion, then that's okay.
Thanks, Rosemary.
It can depend a great deal on where one happens to live as well. I'm fortunate in one sense that I live in a city and there are many different places of worship and different religions present in the city. That's not the case for everyone because Unitarian congregations differ so greatly in their locations.
This is true.
Yeah, I just wondered from what was said in my group whether there's a bit of a generational thing going on, because I shared the experience of having come from a very sort of evangelical early Christian experience with one member. But for me, it was about searching for something that I felt at home with and comfortable with. But I never thought in anything other, I suppose, than another church. And it took me ages to find Unitarianism. So now I feel quite proud of saying I'm a Unitarian, and certainly with my friends of my age, it usually provokes an interesting, it doesn't sort of make people, doesn't seem to make people judge me, or, you know, there are one or two rabid atheists, we all know somebody or other, don't we, who likes to be very challenging, but on the whole, people are really interested. Oh, what's that then? You know, what does that involve? And that sort of thing. And yeah, so, but I felt that for younger people, maybe there was more of a fear of being judged as uncool or whatever, you know, if you admitted to any religious sort of identity, or what people perceive to be a religious identity.
I could speak to that, but I want to see if anyone else, I'm just going to hold off a minute, Louise, see if anyone else wants to say anything to that. Natalie?
Yeah, I suppose just to add, for me, it's not so much about what other people, it is partly what other people perceive when you say words like church, religion. But for me, it's also quite hard to let go of the baggage of what I've been led to believe is meant by church, religion. So it's not just for me about what other people think, it's kind of deconstructing what I was taught as well. So it's sort of a two-sided thing. It's not just sort of external, it's internal as well. And just an aside to throw in, the New Unity congregation was mentioned, which I believe describes itself as a non-religious congregation. And I just wondered how that fitted in with reclaiming the word religious. It sort of seems to be doing the opposite of, you know, reclaiming the word religious, and then we do just leave that word for, as the quote said, the right wing, you know, sort of conservative fundamentalist side.
Yeah. Well, that was the previous, the last minister, so we, you know, watch this space.
I think I was just going to, we'll just chuck in my thing on that, which is, I for many years, I didn't use my doctor title, but then I did because everyone, I felt, no, everyone is an overstatement. A lot of people I met, once they heard I was religious, thought I didn't have a brain. And so I slightly over leveraged the qualifications to try and say, hang on, I used to be a scientist, you know, because the assumption was I was anti-scientific, you know, didn't believe in evolution, whatever, you know, that all that I did find a terrible brick wall of assumptions came up every time. So yeah, I do understand, I really do understand the reticence. I've just become a bit bullish about it. Who else had their hand up? Go on, Louise, if you still wanted to speak.
Just briefly, in connection with the generation gap, it's interesting. Sometimes I found it goes the other way. I've had, when I first came to the Unitarian Church that I'm now a member of and on the committee of, the motto, the message from the older members was very much, no, we don't advertise, we're Unitarian, we don't do that sort of thing, that's evangelism. Whereas the younger Unitarians I've met have been very much more, we speak openly about Unitarian. I'm not sure that actually proves anything, it's simply something I've encountered.
Yeah, people are going to people. Oh, nice.
Yeah, sorry. I think that when approaching like Unitarianism, I find what helps is just go with the spiritualism kind of vibes. I don't know, when you're opening that discussion, it's just like I like to lead with it being spiritual, and then maybe bring in the religious aspects. I think. I don't know. I feel like just way less off-putting going with spiritual over religious. As you mentioned, Jane, there can be some weird pushbacks and people thinking you're kind of one of those religious, yeah, just like super proselytizing kind of person. And I'm like, oh no, that's not me. So let's go with spiritual. I find that helps kind of, and then you expand upon that. So I go spiritual, interconnectedness, and then into like some of the religious elements without going overboard, and that's based on context.
And again, sort of going back to what we said earlier, you won't necessarily be talking about it in the abstract. It'll be, oh yeah, interesting, on Sunday we heard about, or we were talking about, or you know, you will talk about the specifics perhaps of what went on rather than the general concepts, and that connects with people more, I would say. We're going to need to move on shortly unless anyone's burning to speak.
Well, I would just say that most atheists, in my experience, have a completely and utterly outdated view of what Christians actually believe. You know, they seem to think that we all believe in the little old man up in the sky sitting on a cloud and that sort of thing. It's just, you know, it's a complete caricature of what the average Christian in the 21st century actually believes. And I remember a UU Black, very feisty female minister coming across and preaching. She's an old friend. She was an old friend of Andy's, our ministers, and chastising him and saying we had to take back religious terminology, you know, or else it ends up with it ends up as the caricature. How are people going to realize that actually, you know, Christianity or religion isn't like that anymore?
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah.
I might draw a line under that there because we have got a few more things to fit in before the finish. This is as good a moment as any. Carolyn, this was, I must admit, I missed Carolyn's slot. This is just like any other business before we do the closing. So over to you, Carolyn.
Hello. Well, I came up with the idea of a field trip because I think it would be really nice to meet those of you who can get to London. I went to Braintree Museum and learnt about a Unitarian, Samuel Courtauld IV, who lived from 1876 to 1947. He gave his works of art to the nation in the form which became the Courtauld Institute of Art, and the collection is held at Somerset House on the Strand by the river in the centre of London. And I'm suggesting that anyone who wants to come, we arrange between us when to go and have a field trip. And I'm offering overnight accommodation for anyone who is out of London. And it might be possible that any other London Unitarians could also offer a bed for the night and food.
So perhaps we'll, as part of the working out how you're all going to get in touch with each other, perhaps I'll leave it for people to contact you about that because you're going to do logistics and that.
I am. I'm wondering if, what I want to know, if I put my phone number in the chat box, and if anyone is able to create a WhatsApp for it group, it's technically a bit.
Well, I tell you what about if I put your phone number in the email that goes around to everyone at the end of the night?
Yes.
Because then that means the people who aren't here this week will also see it.
Yes. What I want you to give me is your first name, your mobile number, and your email address. That's without a WhatsApp thing.
I'll put that in the message that goes around tonight. Thanks, Caroline.
To sort out when, if we do go, when we do it, and the arrangements.
Smashing. Thank you. Right, we're going to move into the closing now. Let me put your takeaways on screen. My computer's been a bit slow. There we go. So first takeaway, the pursuit of social justice is a core part of the Unitarian way. A phrase beloved of Unitarians is deeds, not creeds. What you do, whether you live a life of kindness, compassion, peace and justice, is generally more important than what you believe. Individually and collectively, Unitarians strive to put their values into action in order to bring about a better world, in the way they relate to others in their everyday lives, in the work they do, in their politics and activism, in their contribution to the local community, and in a commitment to speaking out against injustice and oppression in all spheres of life. Takeaway 2. Unitarians own their faith and speak freely about it. It is possible to be a Unitarian evangelist without proselytizing. If we Unitarians are shy about our faith commitments, we effectively concede the public space to the loudest and most conservative speakers from other traditions, instead of taking our rightful place and representing a progressive alternative. We need to own our Unitarianism and practice being at ease, speaking about our experience and what it means to us. As Carey from IMEU says, evangelism is just sharing something with someone because you think it might be good for them. It's about engaging people and not ensnaring them. Share your ideas, let people know that you're part of a community that affirms and promotes a set of principles that help guide you. And if they aren't interested, let the conversation move on. And finally, Unitarians are perfectly imperfect. How to be a Unitarian is not intended as a course in Unitarian perfectionism. None of us are pursuing all these aspects of Unitarian self-improvement 24/7. This course is an attempt to broaden your sense of what Unitarianism is and what it might be, and give you the opportunity to engage and commit more deeply. We don't want to give you the impression that if you don't go and study theology or develop a spiritual practice or engage with a denomination or volunteer in your congregation or go out and change the world as an activist or tell others about Unitarianism, then you're somehow not a real Unitarianism. If you're a real Unitarian, but all of these will enhance your experience of Unitarianism and improve it for everybody else too. So it's worth considering which of them you can engage with further. Bear in mind the famous words of 19th century Unitarian minister Edward Everett Hale, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do something that I can do." So I will send you all the takeaways in a handy, I was going to say, for you can pin to the fridge. It's a bit big for the fridge, but it will all be on one sheet, so you can refer to that at a later date if you'd like to. Even though this is the final session, I do have one last bit of homework for you. Please write a paragraph reflecting on something that you've learned while you've been on this course. I'd rather you picked one thing that particularly spoke to you that you can go into depth about rather than giving an overview of the whole thing. This is partly for your benefit to consolidate what you've learned, but also to help me get a picture of what's stuck and if I've achieved half of what I hope to with the course. And like I mentioned last time, I would love it if I could encourage a few of you to contribute to a How to Be a Unitarian service in early April. I'm particularly looking at those connected to Kensington, but others are welcome to join in too. And, you know, maybe do something for your own congregation to spread the news with your chums. So I think that's it, except I want to take a bit longer over the checkout this time because it's the last one. So rather than one word, I'll give you a couple of sentences and I want you to take a couple of minutes just sitting quietly. I'll give us till 2052, just to sit quietly and think about one thing you want to take away from the course, or some concluding remark, or something that you're going to ponder or wrestle with further after the course is finished. So something you're going to take away, some concluding remark, or something you're going to ponder or wrestle with further. So sit with that for just 2 minutes, and then I'll call on you to check out in any order you like. So in whatever order you like, when you're ready, unmute yourself and just a sentence or two, whatever you want to share to check out.
just like to say what a privilege it's been to meet such a, and how sustaining it's been to meet such a wonderful group of committed, sincere fellow travelers through this, on the journey through this strange old life that we find ourselves living. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mary.
I'd like to say that the sense of community that this group, these numbers on a Thursday night, that has felt like a manifestation for me of what Unitarianism is supposed to be about, to feel part of something, and something that is empowered by it, each of us being part of the same community. And I'm really happy with that. And I think I can practice that and maybe talk about it to other people outside of, certainly outside of this meeting.
Thanks, Pierre.
I think for me, it's about knowing what you are, but also knowing what you're not. So knowing your own view and your own limits and things like that.
Thanks, Hanson.
My main takeaway is deeds, not creeds. Very simple.
Thank you. Please do just come in when you're ready. You don't need to put your hand up.
Can I just say thank you to Jane for facilitating it? And I've learned a great deal. I really feel a sense of belonging. But in a fortnight's time, I shall really miss you all. So thank you for coming along on this journey with me.
Thanks, Rachel.
I found it very healing to be in such a supportive and thoughtful community of Unitarians that proves we can talk about faith so constructively and learn from each other, getting away from some of the more raucous debates we've had over the past couple of years. I wonder perhaps if members of this group are going to be at any national events over the next year, such as the GA Foy Society Conference and Summer School. If we're able to, perhaps we might manage to meet up.
Thanks, Louise.
Yeah, I would say before I came on the course, I probably had 1 foot in the camp and 1 foot outside the camp. But I feel that both my feet are now in the camp. So that's thanks to you, Jane, and everyone else here. And I do feel that I could call myself a Unitarian now as well, which is quite a big thing for me because I'm not really one for labels. One of the takeaway that still is sitting with me, which it will for now, I've got some work to do on it, is Unitarianism religious? And if it is, how is it so? And I would suspect that I've got to get past the word religion to answer that question, but it's work in progress. So thank you very much, everybody, and I hope to meet you all in person at some point.
Thanks, Emily.
I feel the same, Emily. I feel like really, really drawn, as Louise said, to just being in person with as many of you as possible. Like we've all been together on this, and it's really meant something. And I've slightly been pretending to myself that there was me and there was Unitarianism, and we happen to just kind of in parallel have the same values. And actually, I feel more embedded. I feel more like I'm in a relationship with Unitarianism, like it's more of a dynamic, and I'm owning more that it's changed me, that it's in my blood in a way that it wasn't 5 years ago, and healed me in some ways, and that I'm different because of it, rather than someone who's just kind of walking along next to it, celebrating it. And that's kind of because of what we've all done together. So thank you, Jane, and thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Yeah, I found it really yeah, really informative and challenging at times. And thank you so much, Jane, and all of you. I mean, I think it's been so interesting to hear other people's views on this, and yeah, you know, you know, as Carolyn, she put it so, God has no religion. And then I thought, well, but the religion, so according to the Oxford Dictionary of English, is a belief in and worship of a superhuman controlling power, comma, especially a personal God or gods. And I'm just going to keep working on the superhuman controlling bit. But I'm getting there, and I'm getting more comfortable about being in a religious community, because I think it is I think Unitarians are in a religious community. I think so, yeah.
Thanks, John.
Okay, I'll go. Well, I think I can begin to articulate a little bit better what it means to be a Unitarian, which is very good for for me. I'm going away with just as many questions as I started with, but they're different questions, and very important questions as well. And also, I'm very thankful that I was able to have these small groups where people were very comfortable in talking about their own questions about Unitarianism, bringing them up, and so that's quite good to know that we're all on the journey of trying to figure out what is Unitarianism and where are we in the process of that. So thank you, Jane, for your leadership in this.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah, perhaps I can just say thank you, Jane, for the course. I've enjoyed listening to different people's perspectives. It's been very interesting. Certainly going to keep on thinking about how we engage with the wider community in a meaningful way beyond slogans and this Unitarian evangelism. What exactly is it, and what does it look like? So I'm going to definitely ponder that. So thank you.
Thanks, Duncan.
What I'm taking away is having been in the practicing for many years, and now having some theory. I really appreciate how hard you work, Jane, to provide this for us. And even more, I don't know the difference between Quakerism and Unitarians hardly now. I didn't realize how similar it was, to what degree. I'm going to read the takeaway papers more.
Thanks, Carolyn.
Thank you, Jane. I just want to echo that and perhaps share that one way of describing the difference between Unitarians and Quakers I heard once was that we are, as Unitarians, noisy Quakers in that we sing hymns.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
Go on,
So
if you want. Didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say that also the phrase that I came across in a book by Ralph Halverson, who's the UU minister, to live the questions so that one day we may live a wonderful experience, to have the sense of a body of Unitarians here who can live the Unitarian way in their life in the small ways as well as bigger ones. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, I'll take away the core principles that were explained week 2. Keep reading them and read over them, ponder them, try to live them really.
Thanks, Adam.
I would like to say I've had a lot of conversations I wouldn't normally have with people I wouldn't normally have them with. And that's been stimulating and enjoyable and interesting, and has given me quite a lot of things to think onwards with. And so for that, it's been valuable and good fun.
Thanks, David.
Can I say that in many ways I think that Unitarianism actually is struggling to find a new way of expressing themselves, because it was based on the Christian faith, and that's not disappearing. It's actually a base. It's still a base, but how to express Unitarianism in a slightly different way. And I've certainly been struggling with that, and your expression of it, of this, Jane, has been really very helpful to me, to see that there is beginning to be a new way of looking at us. Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Rosemary.
I'll go next then. Yeah, like everyone has is feeling, it seems, and I'd like to sort of reiterate thanks to Jane and also everyone in the group. It's been really lovely, and I almost kind of feel like I want everyone to have a How to Be a Unitarian graduate badge or something. So if I see you in person, I'll recognise you in whatever forum, because yeah, I would really like to see people in person, particularly this group more so than any other kind of course group. You know, I'm not including Heart and Soul, which isn't a course. I felt people have been able to relate deeply and authentically, and I've appreciated that. So my takeaway, really lots to take away, and I feel like I need to keep going back over this course and go deeper and deeper, but I guess because it's prominent in my mind because we spoke about it tonight, is I need to wrestle more with feeling comfortable with labeling myself with anything, including the word Unitarian, and being religious, and maybe starting to say that I go to church, which I don't even like to use that word, church. So yeah, starting to sort of do the work around those labels, really.
Natalie. You're not compelled to speak, but I know there are a few people who haven't, so I just want to give you a chance to speak if you want to.
Oh.
No, you can.
No, I just wanted to make sure I got the towels back, and I was like, oh, maybe I should stop. No, I just wanted to thank you, obviously, Jane, for running this program and sort of these courses are very insightful. As someone who's very new to Unitarians, it's been very, very helpful getting a sense of what it means to be Unitarian. And also, I find it really interesting because there is a diverse group and diverse perspectives, as was mentioned. And yeah, I appreciate the intergenerational wisdom of people that have been part of Unitarianism for longer. And I'm glad to hear that some of that confusion I was having on what it means to Unitarian is okay. So that was very reassuring. But yeah, just thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. If nobody else wants to speak, I'm going to go for the closing words. Actually, before the closing words, can I take a photograph to commemorate this moment? If you don't want to be in it, you can turn your camera off. If you're happy to be in it, put your Unitarian face on, whatever that is. Thank you very much. So our closing words. In the end, we can all try our best to live out our Unitarian faith through study, conversation, service, commitment, and caring. We forgive ourselves and we forgive others as we stumble through. We disagree, we annoy, we're sometimes flaky with each other. We worship together, we support and hold and affirm one another. Because there's only really one choice between imperfect community and no community at all. Again and again, we're called to choose to commit ourselves to building an ever more just, ever more diverse, ever more loving, and always messy and imperfect, beloved community. Amen. Thank you. I will send all the last little bits and bobs around probably later tonight. And yeah, thank you for being a part of it.